Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you Never by Chance by Sylvia Tate. This is copyright 1947 by Harper and Brothers. You can see up here, it is a Harper novel of suspense. And I was trying to remember where I got my hot little hands on this book. I was kind of discombobulated trying to remember. And I think I know how I came to be interested in it. I'm very interested in the career of Joan Kahn, one of the great mystery editors of all time. She was the head of the Harper Novels of Suspense imprint at Harper from 1946 to 1980. So she had a very long and successful run. She brought lots of great new writers, American writers to the scene. She imported people from abroad, a lot of English writers, gave them a U.S. audience. And, it's just very, very highly respected. And I think I was interested in this book as almost like a look to the past as to what Harper was doing before Joan came on board, because the lore is that Joan basically cut most of the Harper authors loose when she took over. She felt like they were mid-list authors and that she could build a much stronger stable of writers. And so she kept a few, but most of them were new. And so this book was published in 47. Joan Kahn started at Harper in 1946. But, books can be very lengthy things sometimes. So it might be that it was contracted for by Joan's predecessor, and then it was just published while Joan was, the editor of that list, but that she did not acquire it or did not work on it. And I have to tell you, after reading this book, it does not read like a Joan Kahn book. I'd be very surprised if she worked on it, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But that's how I came across it. It's really rare. There's not a single review on Goodreads or Amazon. It truly seems to be forgotten, a truly forgotten mystery. There are a couple of contemporary reviews. One in Kirkus gave it a starred review. The other contemporary reviews that I found kind of got some of the details wrong. They say, oh, it's a great look at the life of a jazz musician. No, there's nothing about the jazz world in here. So if you see the word jazz associated with this book, you're looking at a source that is not reliable. So this book is bizarre. That is the only word I can give you for this book. It's a roller coaster of excellence and terribleness like I have not read in quite some time. So before I get into giving you my pros and cons of this book, I'll just tell you it's very hard to find any information about Sylvia Tate. She's I scoured the internet and can find very, very little about her. Here's a picture of her if you want to see her. She dresses a little bit like Mrs. Olson in Little House on the Prairie. But not very prolific, and there's not a lot of biographical information. And so we really don't know much about her, or at least I don't. I'll tell you a little bit about the plot of the book. Even though the book itself is pretty complicated, the plot is simple. The way it starts is this Hollywood guy. He's a composer and a musician and an instrumentalist. And he has a successful career writing scores and songs for Golden Age Hollywood movies. Young guy, name is Johnny Selassie. He's 24, 25, but he's got kind of the maturity and the gravitas to know what it takes to be successful in that world. And he's head over heels in love with this woman, Corinne, and they've been living together for about a month. He comes home from work one night. They like to go out for walks. It takes place in Hollywood. They go out for a late night walk, and a bunch of teenagers who are high, come screeching down the road at 80 miles an hour, and they hit Corinne, and she's dead as soon as she hits the street. They kill her, and it's really sad because Johnny loves her so much. He's head over heels in love with her, and he's brokenhearted. So, they've only been together for, a little more than a month. So he doesn't really know that much about her. And so he feels like, well, I've got to find her people. I've got to find the people who were important to her to notify them of her death. As tragic as it will be, they have a right to know. So he starts with her address book. And I love that as a plot device because, back in the day, that was your life, right? Your life was in your physical address book. And so many books of this era, right up through the 70s and 80s, the police or the PI always start with your address book to kind of figure out who you are and what you were up to. And Johnny starts just basically calling the numbers in here and asking people if he can come over and visit them and ask them about Corinne. And as he goes from person to person, he realizes that Corinne has told a different story to every person about who she is, where she was born, what her background was. Nothing adds up. Nothing. When she would start to get close to somebody, she would just kind of disappear on them. And she had certain things, like if someone complimented her, she would disappear. Or, someone would say something innocuous and she would take enormous offense and disappear. So Johnny starts to wonder, who was she? Because he can't figure out who she was. No two people are telling him the same thing. So the question becomes, was she a criminal? Was she on the lam? Was she hiding from the law? She would not marry him. She would live with him, but she wouldn't marry him. So another question he has is she married to somebody else? And, can he find her husband if such a person exists? And this is where the first 150 pages of this book are riveting. It's so, for the reader, right, as you hear all these different people talking about their experiences with Corinne, you, the reader, you're trying to look for the strands of commonality, to sort of grab them into a bundle to figure out who Corinne really was. But you can't do it because she's such a cipher. And it depresses Johnny because he loved her. He wanted to believe that she loved him. He starts to wonder, was she just looking for a meal ticket, or was I just temporary like the rest of all these other people? And, was she going to just, kick me to the curb, if I looked at her the wrong way, which is what she did with other people. So he's kind of heartbroken, and he hits a dead end. And then the book goes off the rails. With a few things that just drove me mad. The first is, I don't think I have ever seen a more syrupy sweet, saccharine, gaga goo goo romance between two adults. I mean, to me, I'm a cynic, I admit it. It was nauseating, this relationship between the two of them. It was so adolescent, and like I felt like someone had dumped 25 tons of high fructose corn syrup on my head. It was that sweet and treacly. None of it rang true to me. I thought, these are not real people. These are Ken and Barbie. Which is odd because Johnny on his own is likable, but put Johnny with Corinne and they became these two gloppy, just nauseating people. And then Johnny gets involved in a quasi-romance later on, and that is ridiculous and syrupy, and not a word of it rang true to me. So that just was like skim. I couldn't put up with all that romance crap that did not need to be in there, especially later in the book. The second is, it becomes endless pontification and philosophizing about death and the human condition and, the great meta questions, that philosophers have been asking since time began. There's a place for some of that in any book, right? To dig a little deeper, to look a little bit more in yourself, but not at the expense of the plot stops dead so that you can have 80 pages of conversations that go nowhere and mean nothing. And that is really what happens. And then by the last 30 pages of this book, it takes a left turn like you cannot believe. When you finally get to the bottom of, when Johnny finally gets to the bottom of who Corinne was and what her background was, it required him to kind of go on the road with a traveling band because he wasn't getting the information he needed in Hollywood. It takes you to an ending that you're scratching your head like, what? Huh? Where did this come from? It's just bizarre. I mean, that's the only word I can think of. So it's hard to believe that the author would have had that ending in mind if she plotted out the book. I kind of have a feeling she just kind of couldn't figure out what to do with it, and then she came up with this ending, which I have to say, in other books where this ending would have been better set up, I think I might have actually liked the ending. But here, like I said, it was a head scratcher, and I thought, first of all, it doesn't really explain why Corinne was the way she was, or why she acted the way she acted, and it's not particularly resolving for Johnny. It's not particularly resolving for the reader, and I just thought, wow, this book was like the second half was just a train wreck. If Sylvia Tate had been able to take what she did in those first 150 pages, which are riveting, and continue that through the end of the book, this could have been a great novel of suspense. Really, top notch. But as it is, it's just kind of this odd admixture of a whole bunch of different elements that to me did not come together. I'll also tell you another thing. This is not a reflection on the writer, although maybe it is. But if you could see here, that's not really the best option. So take a look at these pages. This book is jam-packed with type. There are practically no margins. The font size is tiny, and there's very little space between the lines or leading. So I know how that happens. When you have a page count to make, and books of this era like to come in, around 300 pages or less. Many of Joan Kahn's books came in at 220, 250. You have to find ways to squeeze all those words onto a given page count. And that's how the margins shrink, the type shrinks, and the leading shrinks, right? It's because you're shoving everything into an allotted number of pages. And it was really difficult on my eyes. My eyes were bleary. It's not like, because I'm a reader-centric editor, book design is very important to me. And I would have said, I don't want my readers to be squinting at the pages, because there's so many words on a page that they just have to kind of, almost read with their finger to keep up with what's going on. But there's a way to solve that problem. And that is, you take out your red pen and you get rid of all the extraneous bullshit and nonsense that does not need to be in here. That second treacly romance should not have happened. All that endless philosophizing, dozens and dozens of pages of conversation that do not further the plot, do not further character, do not serve any purpose. Those should have been ripped out. And that's why I think this was not a Joan Kahn book, because Joan would not have put up with that kind of verbal diarrhea without saying, this book is not getting published until you do something about streamlining your book. So it, kind of a sign to me of a writer who loved her own words, loved her own book so much that she couldn't take a step back as an editor of her own work and say, is this something readers will enjoy, or is this just me kind of loving the sound of my own voice and doing what I want to do without thinking about what my readers would want? I mean, when you put a novel of suspense on a book jacket, that's telling your market something, that they're going to want to just keep reading and reading and reading. But after page 150, the book becomes a slog. It becomes almost a novel of anti-suspense. Just really a slog, and I did end up skimming. But like I said, the book had tremendous potential. I think if Joan Kahn had been the editor, I don't know she wasn't, but I think she wasn't, I think we would have had a very different book in our hands. So what can I tell you? If you're adventurous and you want to try something unique, let's use that word, unique, that takes you places you did not expect to go, not necessarily in a good way, I would say give it a try. It'll probably be hard to find a copy, but I just had to share this with you all because I've been shaking my head. I finished a couple days ago. I've been shaking my head and trying to describe it to friends and other colleagues, and just finding myself at a loss for words. So, but I'm never at a loss for words on this channel. Go figure. So that's it. Never by Chance by Sylvia Tate. The title is kind of hinting at the fact that that Corinne's death was foretold. Just wacky. Okay, that's what I've got for you tonight. Thanks for listening. And if you watch this channel because you like really forgotten books, I don't think you're going to find anyone more forgotten than this one, because there's almost nothing about it. Let me add on a closing note that I really did like the look at the musician's life, in the Hollywood film system, and it's nice to spend time with a talented protagonist. He's a great songwriter, a great musician. I'm an amateur musician, by no means a pro, so I know some stuff about music, and it felt really real. It felt like Sylvia Tate really knew what music was about, and she wrote about it well, and that's a check in the plus column. But as I just mentioned, there are many checks in the minus column. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a good night. Bye now.